The laughter stopped so suddenly that even the roots fell silent mid-beat. Jimmy Fallon froze behind his desk, his signature smile vanishing as he watched Kevin Hart's expression change from comedic confidence to something much deeper, much more vulnerable. In the third row of the studio audience, a 7-year-old boy had just asked the question that would transform a late-night comedy show into something far more profound. It was supposed to be a typical Tuesday night taping at 30 Rock. The Tonight Show was running smoothly. Jimmy and Kevin were in perfect comedic rhythm, trading jokes about Kevin's latest movie, his family, and of course, his height. The audience was eating it up. Kevin had just delivered his signature bit about airplane seats when the small voice cut through the laughter, like a knife through silk. "Mr. Kevin, why aren't you ashamed of being short?" The studio fell into an eerie silence. Camera operators stopped adjusting their shots. Production assistants paused mid-motion. Even the audience members turned to look at the source of the question. Marcus Rivera, a 7-year-old sitting between his grandmother and aunt, his legs barely reaching the edge of his seat. Kevin Hart, the man who had built an empire on self-deprecating humor about his height, suddenly found himself speechless. For the first time in his career, a joke about his stature wasn't funny. Because this wasn't a joke. This was a child seeking answers, seeking hope, seeking something Kevin had spent decades learning to find within himself. Jimmy immediately sensed the shift. He'd seen Kevin handle hecklers, tough interviews, even emotional moments. But this was different. This 7-year-old had inadvertently touched something raw, something real beneath all the practiced comedy. "Hey there, little man," Jimmy said gently, standing up from behind his desk. "What's your name?" "Marcus," the boy replied, his voice small but clear in the hushed studio. "I'm 7 years old, and I'm the shortest kid in my class. Everyone calls me names." Kevin had built his career on turning his height into a superpower, but sitting in that guest chair, looking at this brave little boy, he felt like that scared 8-year-old from North Philadelphia again. The one who came home crying because the bigger kids had pushed him around. The one who stared at himself in the mirror, wishing he could grow just a few more inches. Jimmy walked around his desk, something he rarely did during interviews. The cameras followed him as he approached the audience. But this wasn't about television anymore. This was about a child who needed answers that only Kevin Hart could provide. "Marcus," Jimmy said, kneeling down to the boy's level, "can you come up here with us? I think Kevin has something important to tell you." The audience watched in complete silence as Marcus's grandmother helped him down from his seat. The little boy walked down the aisle, his sneakers squeaking slightly on the polished floor. When he reached the stage, Jimmy gently lifted him up and set him down next to Kevin's chair. Kevin looked at Marcus, seeing himself in those wide, questioning eyes. The comedian who could work any crowd, who could turn any situation into laughter, found himself struggling for words. "Marcus," Kevin said, his voice softer than anyone in the studio had ever heard it. "Can I tell you something that I've never told anyone on television before?" The boy nodded, his small hands clasped in front of him. Kevin took a deep breath, looking out at the audience, then at Jimmy, then back at Marcus. "When I was your age, I used to pray every night that I would wake up taller. I thought if I was bigger, kids would stop picking on me. I thought if I was taller, my dad would be proud of me. I thought everything would be easier." Jimmy remained standing beside them, not interrupting, not trying to lighten the mood. He understood that this moment was bigger than comedy, bigger than entertainment. "But you know what I learned, Marcus," Kevin continued, now sitting forward in his chair so he could look directly into the boy's eyes. "Being different isn't something to be ashamed of. It's something that makes you special. All those kids who are picking on you, they're just scared because you have something they don't have." "What do I have?" Marcus asked, his voice barely audible. Kevin stood up from his chair and knelt down in front of Marcus, bringing himself to the child's eye level. "You have courage, little man. Do you know how brave you had to be to ask me that question in front of all these people? Most grown-ups wouldn't have that kind of courage. The studio audience was completely captivated. Some were wiping away tears. Others were leaning forward in their seats. This wasn't the Kevin Hart they knew from movies and comedy specials. This was Kevin Hart, the human being, sharing his truth. Marcus, Jimmy said gently. Kevin's right. What you just did took real courage. And you know what? I was picked on too when I was your age. Marcus looked up at Jimmy with surprise. You were? Oh yeah, Jimmy said, sitting down on the floor so he was at Marcus's level too. Kids used to make fun of my voice, my laugh, everything. They said I was weird and annoying. Sometimes I believed them. Kevin nodded, understanding exactly what Jimmy was sharing. The thing is, Marcus, all that pain, all that feeling different, it taught us something important. It taught us that everyone is fighting their own battles. Everyone has something they're dealing with. But how do you not feel sad about it? Marcus asked, and the question hit both men like a physical blow. Kevin was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of years of experience, of pain transformed into purpose. I do feel sad sometimes, Kevin admitted. Even now, even as a grown-up. But I learned that my size isn't my limitation. It's my motivation. Every time someone told me I was too short to succeed, I worked twice as hard to prove them wrong. Jimmy watched as Kevin reached into his pocket and pulled out a small pin from his jacket lapel. It was a simple golden star that he wore to every public appearance. Marcus, this star was my grandmother's. She gave it to me when I was about your age, and she told me something I'll never forget. She said, Kevin, stars look small from far away, but up close they're the biggest, brightest things in the universe. Kevin pinned the star to Marcus's shirt, right over his heart. I want you to have this, and I want you to remember that you're a star. You might look small to some people, but inside, you're burning bright and strong. The audience erupted in spontaneous applause, but Kevin held up his hand for silence. He wasn't finished. And Marcus, I want to make you a promise. Whenever you feel sad, whenever kids are mean to you, whenever you feel like being different is too hard, I want you to remember this moment. Remember that Kevin Hart believes in you. Jimmy Fallon believes in you. All these people believe in you. Jimmy stood up and walked to his desk, returning with a business card. Marcus, this is my personal number. Not my manager's. Not my assistant's. Mine. If you ever need to talk to someone who understands what it's like to be different, you call me, okay? The 7-year-old nodded, tears streaming down his face. But for the first time since walking onto that stage, they were happy tears. Kevin wrapped Marcus in a gentle hug, and Jimmy joined them. The three of them stood there in the middle of the Tonight Show stage, surrounded by cameras and lights and an audience of strangers who had just witnessed something extraordinary. You know what, Marcus? Kevin said as they broke apart. Being short didn't stop me from becoming successful. It didn't stop me from having a beautiful family. It didn't stop me from living my dreams. And it won't stop you either. Jimmy looked out at the audience, then at the cameras. Ladies and gentlemen, sometimes the most important conversations happen when we least expect them. Marcus, you just taught all of us something important about courage, about kindness, about seeing the strength in what makes us different. As the show went to commercial break, Kevin knelt down one more time to speak privately with Marcus. Whatever he whispered made the little boy smile, the biggest, brightest smile anyone in that studio had ever seen. The episode aired 2 weeks later, unedited, raw, and real. It became the most watched Tonight Show episode of the season, not because of the comedy, but because of the humanity. Marcus's question had unlocked something in both Kevin and Jimmy, something authentic and powerful that resonated with millions of viewers who had ever felt different, ever felt small, ever felt alone. Because sometimes, the most profound moments come from the smallest voices, asking the biggest questions. Years later, Marcus would keep that golden star pinned to his bedroom wall. He'd go on to become the captain of his high school debate team, proving that big voices can come from small packages. Kevin would check in on him regularly, just as he promised, becoming not just a celebrity idol, but a real mentor and friend. And Jimmy Fallon learned something that night that changed how he approached every show afterward. That the most powerful television happens when you stop performing and start connecting. When laughter transforms into something deeper, something that touches the heart as much as it tickles the funny bone. The golden star Kevin gave away that night was replaced by something even more valuable. The knowledge that sometimes the biggest impact we can make is simply by sharing our truth with someone who needs to hear it. In a world that often makes people feel small, that night reminded everyone watching that true strength isn't measured in inches, but in the courage to be exactly who you are.